In the previous presentation, you saw how the Orders API can be used to access the baskets and the payment methods and create a purchase order from a basket on the runtime site. So now we're going to take a look at some of the order management APIs, and these are basically used for managing orders from deleting baskets or viewing inside the basket the details, as well as to look for purchase orders, create payment methods. These APIs you've already seen in action by having the customer and order manager. The customer order manager uses the web services to interact with these objects. So as before, you need to create a context, and then from this context you can access one of these managers. Again, see, the basket manager will allow you to modify and interact with the basket, the user's basket, and the purchase order will allow you to search and interact with the purchase orders that have been created. The payment method manager will allow you to create payment, and the shipping method manager will allow you to create shipping methods. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these APIs in action and how you can use them. So I've set up a Windows form application to do our demo, and so we're going to connect using the URL, and we're going to connect using the site name. And then the way I've set this up is, if you look at the code, we're going to create two variables so we can use them over and over again in the form. And then I also created this orders util with some functions in there, and we're going to be using these. So there's our two function here that we're going to use to connect to the order manager or the order system management APIs, and then try to get baskets and do updates on the purchase order, and as well as do updates in the basket. So I also have this XML file here. So this XML file is basically used to send a basket as an order. The way when you connect to the orders APIs, when you update a basket, you have to go through the you are connecting using the URL for the web services. The reason for that is that if you connect using the site, it doesn't know where the pipeline components exist, and therefore it won't be able to execute that method. So this method of updating baskets is not supported through the site agent. We have to go through the URL. So let's go ahead and write some code here. Actually, let's go to the code behind here and create two variable. The order management context, and then a second one, we're going to use a data set. Okay, and then we're going to go to the util class, and we're going to create. So the first one is going to be, let's give it some real estate here. So the first one is going to be creating a context from a URL. So let's go ahead and create a order service agent. So we can pass it the URL here, and then we need to set some properties for it. For example, the credentials. I'm going to use the credentials that I'm logged in as. So I'm going to get my default credentials. If you're going to connect using a different your set of credentials, you would have to create a credential object and then set that here. We're also going to set the keep alive to true, otherwise you'll have some unpredicted behavior. So then we're going to return a order management context. Okay, so that's our first method. Now to create the context using a site name, it's going to be similar, except we're going to create this using the order site agent object. And it requires a site name. And let's return the order management context. Okay. So now let's go to our form here. So for the first one, we're going to call create context from URL, and we're going to pass it the first text box, which has the URL. And then for the other button, we're going to pass the site name. So to make sure that these guys got connected with some kind of response, let's go ahead and put some debug info here. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and launch our form and test it out. And we got some errors. We are getting errors because of our methods are not returning anything. I'm going to set everything to null right now. Okay, let's try it again. And some more errors. This is a void, so it's not going to get anything. And so is this. Try it one more time. Okay, so if we look at the output parameter back, or the output window back here, so if we connect using the context URL, we should see our little message here that we got connected. So there we go. So the context was created successfully. Now if we try to connect using the site name, the context was created again. So we know that creating a context based on the site name or versus a URL works. So let's go ahead and actually put some information on the getting basket, getting purchase order, payment manager, and shipping manager. So let's go to our basket manager, and so we need to get the basket. So let's actually set our data set to where is util.getBasket, passing it our context. Okay, and we're going to also use a combo box. First, let's make sure that there are no items in it. So we'll clear everything out and make sure that our data grid, where we're going to bind everything to, is cleaned up. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through every data table in our data set and write out the table names in our combo box. And that's going to be our dt.table. Okay. Now when the user has an interaction with the combo box, we want to make sure that we display some data for that, and we're going to set the data source equals to the dataset.tables, and we're going to pass this as the combo box's selected item. So that should set the selected index. Now to do the same thing for the purchase order manager, let's just go ahead and copy this code up above here. And change this to get purchase order, passing it a context and getting back a data set. Clear the stuff out and add this stuff in here for the data item. Okay, let's go ahead and also write some code for our payment manager. So for the payment manager, we're just gonna call the method and passing a context. Most of the work is going to actually happen in the method itself, and we'll just write out to the debug console some information. And same thing here. So we pass the context. Now to update the basket, what we need to do is we need to just call the update basket, passing a context, and then we'll do most of the work in that method. For the purchase order, first what we need to do, the purchase order is a little bit different than the basket. We'll first pass it we're gonna have to pass it the data set instead of an XML, which we'll see in a little bit. So we'll just call the orders util .update. First we need to get a purchase order, so we'll say get a purchase order and pass it a context and go for our table, and the table is going to have purchase order. We want to go for the rows collection. We're going to go to the first row, and we want to modify the order status, which is status, and we want to set this to cancel. So we're going to basically cancel the order. Once you updated the data set, we now need to go ahead and send this information to our order API to do the update. So pretty much the groundwork is done here as far as calling the APIs. We need to now go in and fill in the information for the order util. So the first one is to get the basket and get our purchase order. These are the easy ones to go with. So we're going to write the code for the get basket, and then we'll basically do a little bit of a cut and paste from here to down at the bottom, and I'll explain what I'm doing as we go along. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get a basket manager. So we get the basket manager, and so we get from our context. So let's go get our context. Now we got a basket manager. From this basket manager now, we need to be able to, we can't just say give me a basket, you have to search for baskets. To do that, we have to call on a dataset object. So the first dataset is going to be a searchable properties. So in order for you to get a basket, you're going to have to search for orders, and to do that we need to call the get searchable properties, passing in a language ID, and this language ID is going to be en-us for us. So now once we give that, let's go ahead and try to display this information out into the debug console so you can see what type of information is coming back for us. So we're going to go to iterate the data tables. Okay. And so we're going to go ahead and do system diagnostic.debug.writeLine, and we're going to first write the table name, and dt.table name, and then we're going to go ahead and put some kind of a separator here. Okay, and then we'll do another for each loop, and this one is going to be for the data rows in our table. And in this one we want to write our data row information. We'll get the first index value. Okay, so once we got that, let's go ahead and copy this information here. And okay, there we go. So now we can see some information about what's inside of this searchable property. So you probably would want to show this in a form for your users so they can select which properties that they can search on baskets. We're going to go ahead and do some hard coding here to get a basket. So we're going to need to go to the search clause factory, and so from the basket manager we need to get a search clause factory, and we need to pass it the searchable information that we had the data set that we have up here. So that's our searchable properties, and we need to tell it which entity to look into. Since we are interested in baskets, we're going to go ahead and look into baskets. Okay, so let's set that in there. Now that we have this search clause factory, we need to now get a search clause from this. So to get a search clause, we'll go to our search clause factory, and we'll create a search clause. So we can pass it a explicit operation. So explicit operation, and this is going to be greater than. So, and then we're going to pass it a property name that we want to look for. I'm going to make sure that I get a line item, so I'm going to say line item. I'm going to do a generic line item count, having greater than 0. So at least I'll get to have a one or more baskets coming back. Now, if you noticed on the search clause factory, if I wanted to search on more than one column, then I would use the insert clause and intersect clause and union clause. The intersect and union clause is basically grouping the search with one or more column using the AND or the OR operator. So for right now, we'll just keep it as one clause right now. And so next we need to set some search options. Okay. And so we can set some values for, okay, so okay, there we go. So we can also look for properties to return, maybe set some sorting on which property you want to sort, perhaps maybe on a column called created, so it can be sorted based on the date of when they were created. And we can also set some other options, for example, number of records to return. So let's actually ask for let's ask for one record. So now that we have the options set, we can then create a data set, which is going to be our basket. And we'll go back to our basket manager, and or actually we're going to be searching baskets, and we're going to pass it a search clause, which we have created, and we can pass it a search option. So there we go, and we're going to go ahead and return this basket as a data set. Notice that there was also another API here that would get a basket, get baskets by passing a array of group IDs as well. Okay, so let's actually copy some of this code, because most of this is going to be reusable. And we need to put that in here. So instead of getting the basket manager, we need to get a PO manager, which is our purchase order. So let's actually get a purchase order manager. So we're going to also get the searchable properties, same as before. Pass it the language ID, iterate through that, dump out all the information. So let's get our search clause factory, pass it the entities, what we want to look into. As far as what we're going to look into, is no longer going to be a basket for us. So this is going to be purchase order. So we're going to look into purchase order. And as far as the setting the creating a clause, so this actually passes us a search clause factory. So then from this search clause factory we create a clause, and this clause is going to be greater than, and we're going to set this for total having at least greater than $1, so we know we're going to get something back. And again, setting the sort properties and some other options. So the last thing we want to do is so I made a mistake here. This should be purchase order manager. Okay, so that's all set, and here we're getting a PO back. I'm going to do search purchase orders, making sure I set this correctly. Yep. And we're going to return a PO and return. As far as getting payment methods, this is going to be, or the shipping, this is going to be pretty simple. So let's go ahead and code this really quick. So this is going to be pretty easy. We're just going to do the, from the context, we're just going to get the payment methods. So set this as the payment method collection, because that's what we're going to get back. So payments from context, whoops, context, so we want to go for payment manager dot payment methods, and that returns all of the payment methods for us. So we'll just do another quick for each loop. So payment method and payments. Okay, so string method name. Oops. So now we're going to get the names for the payment methods. Okay, and set a GUID for method ID. Okay, and the last thing we want to do is I'll put out the information here. So name, method name, and the ID is method ID. Okay, so and then we can pass the payment collection if we want to do something with that. So this is pretty much the same as the shipping information, so we'll just cut and paste that and change some of the values here. So this is going to be ship method collection. I just call it shippings. Okay. So now from this, we get the shipping method name. And we get the shipping group ID. Okay, and we output the information and pass back our shipping information. So now to update the purchase order and to update the basket. So we said we're going to do most of the work for the basket here, and we're going to try to use the XML file here. So what I've done is I've told it that choose the XML file to be copied in the output directory, so it's going to go into the bin directory debug, so that when we launch this application, the XML file exists there and we can pull that information from that. So if you look at this XML file, notice that it has a basket information and it has a bunch of attributes associated to it about this basket. Pretty much everything here is going to be attribute based, so now we have order forms. So you can have multiple order forms here, and then we also have our addresses. So if you look at the addresses, that's pretty much everything you would see: line address 1, line address 2, the name, postal code, and such. If there's any shipping information, that'd be here. For the payment method, it's in here. We're basically telling it to use a credit card, and we're passing it some shipping information here. And if we go to the line item, so we're telling it which ship method name to use, as well as some inventory and some other information here, so that the pipeline components can go do their jobs. So we're looking into the AdventureWorks catalog, and I should have a product ID here, which should be, and there we go. So we're looking for that product. Okay, so let's close this. Now to code this, what we need to do is first we need to get a basket manager. From our context, we get a basket manager. Then what we want to do is we want to read the XML and oops. So it's going to require a file name, which in our case we said it was order save basket.xml. So once we have this XML, we now need to call the basket manager to accept this. So it returns back a XML element, So we'll call this XML basket. We need to go back to our basket manager, and then from this we do a accept basket. So it's got two parameters we need to pass it, or actually, excuse me, three parameters. So the first one is going to be the XML element. So it's going to go to our XML document, and we want the document element, and then we need to tell it which pipeline component to execute. And for the web service, since we're calling a web service, in the web services there's a different pipeline component called accept basket, and that's going to be executed for us. And do we want to save this as an order? It's going to be true. Now if you just wanted to check to see, to show the information to the user, so when you execute this the first time, you'd run to the pipeline component to do all the totaling and stuff, and then do something with this XML. Then when you call again, then you would actually set the property to true so that the user could save that information. Now for updating a purchase order, this is a little bit more simpler than that, because we are accepting a data set. So we go for a purchase order manager. Okay, and all we do here is we're going to take the PO manager dot I believe it's update purchase order. So it's requiring our data set, and we need to pass it a application ID. There's a table inside of our database that has very specific values, because it needs to know which application is updating. Okay, and let's close this. Okay, so if we go to our database and we look at the C# site transaction config, in there's this table called status manager. So in the status manager, these are the applications that can interact and update orders, because you don't want to have orders coming in from different applications and overriding each other. So you set this up as rights of what they can, which application can do what updates on the status. So let's go ahead and fire up our application to see if there's any errors. So we had some build errors. So this is one of them. Update purchase, it's expecting 2, so we should pass it our data set. And let's see. Oh, this is properties to return. So which is wrong. We need to go for number of records to return. Let's make sure that we set this correctly as well. There we go. Let's try this again. Okay, build succeeded. So let's make sure that we have some baskets. Let's open up our customer order manager. Okay, so let's minimize this. Let's go, first we want to make sure we have no orders. because we want to be able to, so let's just delete this. Okay, and then we want to go to the baskets. We want to make sure we have at least one basket so we can interact and see it on our API. So we don't have that. Let's quickly go to our C# site and create a basket. Let's go and log into our site. Okay, let's go ahead and create a basket here. Okay, so now we have a basket. So let's go here and we're going to connect using the URL first. Let's look at the output. Okay, so the context was created. So now if we click the basket manager, we should, so as you notice, here's all the searchable columns. And so if we go to our basket, this is the group ID that we get back from this. So let's actually now look at our payment methods. So we had our Visa and we have our MasterCard here. So if we search for shipping manager, so now there's our shipping, simple shipping with the ID there. So now we should be connected to our URL. We should be able to update our basket. So if I click update basket, so could not find file, order. Oh, so I made a mistake here. There should be orders. Okay. Alright, so it executed and it seems that we have a purchase order coming back, so that must have worked. So let's actually go to our orders. So we should have one order here, and we do. So if we open this up, so here's our order that we sent. Okay. And let's go ahead and do a update on our purchase order. So it looks like we may not have a row here. Okay, so it looks like this is null. Yep, so our purchase order table is null. Let's actually look at our data set. Okay, so let's actually stop this. Let's go and see if we're calling the correct method here. Okay, we are getting a record back. So we actually need to do one more thing here. So we need to go get set PO equals to PO manager, get purchase order as data set, and pass it a GUID. So that's what I didn't do. And inside of this, I'm going to get the PO.tables. The first one, and it's going to be dot rows, the first row and the first column. So that should work for us. And let's take a look at our baskets. Now that we have the basket, we'll do the same thing for this. I'm going to pass it our basket, not tables, the first row, and the first column. Just run this again. Let's just connect to our site agent this time. Okay, so we got the context created. So let's go to our basket manager. Okay, so now we can see lots of information about the basket. So let's do the same thing for the purchase order. Okay, so now we can see information about the purchase order and perhaps maybe line items. Okay, and let's test the update on the purchase order. And now let's get the purchase order. So if we look at the status, notice that the status is cancelled now. So our code worked. So just to quickly review here, what I've shown you is how to create a context using the URL, how to create a context using a site, get a basket, get a purchase order, get payment methods, how to update purchase order, and how to update a basket. And also one quick thing about baskets is that you need to make sure that the you pass the basket as an XML, and you want to make sure that you pass it a pipeline component in there. So if we go look at our web service, so here's our pipeline components, and there's our accept basket pipeline components, which is defined in the web config. In a later lesson, we'll go over all the pipeline component configurations in the web config settings.